Warning. This video contains at least passing references. The following skit is a recreation of a probably real conversation betwixt a bike and a bourgeois. I don't understand, Mr. Wigbig. I have framing rims on the axles of my wheels, my chain is harvested from the remains of retired indestructible shipyard vessels, my wheels are spinny and fine-tuned to the point of burning all rubber in a 50-kilometer radius, and I have a horn! Critics have praised me and hailed me and showered me with claims that I'm the best tour, pet, and cultural artifact in existence. How, in the name of Saddam Hussein's otherworldly left titty, have I been discontinued? Simple answer, my bipedal buddy boy. You're not profitable. I am the best invention ever engineered by mankind. There is zero chance in a world with Barbie fishing poles and slide into the DM's algebra puns on t-shirts that I am considered unable to adequately pursue you arbitrary profit margins. But you are my putty product, Lamau. Your cost of production is extremely expensive, and if demand for you falls even slightly, our company shall go kaploose like a man thrown off a bridge for being gay in a Christian town. You are no longer a valuable asset to our company, and we therefore must sacrifice you for the greater good. The greater good! Well, all are good, but you see my point. Yeah. I am nothing but an asset to a company. An asset whose very ability to thrive is dependent on said company, and who is easily discarded simply so that the few riches can stay rich, while my and my family's entire lifestyles are ripped away from us like a leech from a baby's forehead! Yeah, pretty much. Wait a second. That doesn't sound like something a bike would say. No. It can't be. No way, Jose. Uh-oh, Spaghetti-O. Mamma mia, I've got diarrhea. You know, bike. You must be. That's right! I am the common worker, and you, old man, are guilty of exploiting the common working person and caring nothing of their fate beyond the workplace. Konnichiwa, chubby chunks. Big Honk 3R here, getting lit into club. And may the almighty Honk be with you. Now, while my shower thoughts lead me many different places and sometimes to unpleasant situations I would rather not be in, I would like to pose a question I deem potentially worthy of your squat and dumpy attention span. Why do human beings justify stuff they're wrong about? I know the obvious answer, BT dubs. I'm just pretending to be stupid to shish kebab my way into the main topic. This can range from minor things like explaining why the way you mop the floor is correct when it's not, or defending how the earth is flat when it's not, or complimenting Ben Shapiro or any of his points when it's not, to more extreme cases like denying climate change, denying the freaking Holocaust, Jesus. Defending why you deny climate change and the Holocaust, and defending puppy mills, or domestic abuse, or slavery.
I don't like Lincoln because of what he stood for and what he tried to do, and for his northern aggression war that he put onto the South to take our rights away.
Whites had been working for the past several hundred years to eliminate slavery throughout the globe. And even when we bought the black slaves, we treated them extremely well.
They still had better lives here than they did back in Africa.
As slaves, they had better lives here.
There are some that would argue that. You can look that up. Their descendants, the descendants of those slaves, have much better lives here than the descendants of people who would have never gotten on those slave boats in Africa. And that's a provable fact.
But Big Honk! You peep, your eyes widening as you nervously munch on a bowl of glazed Doritos. The bowl, not the Doritos. I don't know what you're talking about. What kind of sadistic freakhead would defend a puppy mill? Shamefully, I know a guy. The bourgeois, well, not always, but the person who runs the freaking puppy mill likely wields a clear material incentive in the form of money to keep their stupid operations going, because otherwise puppy mills wouldn't exist. Yet atrocities continue against all kinds of marginalized and kind of marginalized people and people groups, and it's somehow represented as a stance in a political party.
Sorry yet? I think I peed a little.
What is up, Popweiler Nation? It's your boy Popweiler, and I'm currently on public domain because I didn't feel like staying inside for another second, and I'm such a rebel because I'm not wearing a mask. Oh man, that felt so good. Yeah, it's really good to be hitting you with another vlog, guys. It's so amazing. So yeah, what are we talking about today? Well, capitalism. Yeah, oh man, that's right. I was gonna schedule an interview with my favorite smooth jazz musician, Dr. Dre, but sadly he was unable to make it because he can't be seen in public. Poor guy. So yeah, guys, let's get right into it with today's 3 top factors, right? Oh man, I'm just about to poop my pants in excitement. And also it's cold. Basically, guys, number 1, right? You got classism. Number 2, you got environmental destruction. And number 3, you got discrimination against marginalized groups by arbitrary factors. It's simple. Now, classism, that's an easy one to explain because it's the entire premise of capitalism, essentially, right? You got the rich, who are a tiny amount of people who have gained enormous power through their wealth. And you got the masses, who don't really have too much power. I mean, they've got, a little bit, but, most of it comes down to Netflix and chill rather than paying off government officials to do a thing that you want them to do. And this class division and wealth gap is causing, essentially an oligarchy of billionaires. I would also like to point out that our society is insane because we have allowed individuals like Elon Musk to accumulate such wealth that they can do essentially anything. But the problem with this is that this person is Elon Musk. Environmental destruction, that's an easy one too, right? Basically, you got this tree, but you got a guy who wants to cut down the tree. And so basically, he uses money to justify cutting down the tree. It's pretty much just that.
Hey kids, it's Pupweiler about 8 months into the future, since sadly my physical form withered to a lifeless husk before I could finish my bit. Would you like to see the gender differences between the 2 shiny forms of Gen 9's 2 newest legendary Pokemon? Just Google Hutu Tutsi differences and note how the promotion of stereotypes and racial profiling were predominant attributes that heavily influenced the Rwandan genocide. Nothing is real! In many other examples of clearly horrendous and frankly stupid things, where somebody or something suffers often needlessly as a result, have dedicated defenders rallying to those causes in bulk like a bunch of sardines joining together to offer a sacrifice to the greasy geese god in the sky. We as a society tend to shun such miggity mofos whose brains have a storage capacity of about a few hundred megabytes at max, but there seems to me to be a vocal sector of the population morphing like an icky puddle of the monster blood that tends to advocate for policies that inevitably harm, exploit, or discriminate against compartmentalized groups as a result. What makes some stooge stick gum down your throat and unironically defend a thing that's kinda clearly sorta horrid to crocodiles like you and me and Ukiokabuki? Well, there's many reasons. The obvious one is that they believe it to be morally acceptable, for a variety of reasons we'll discuss later, possibly. Some may think that by attacking the atrocity, you are attacking their way of life, which I guess makes their ways of life atrocious by definition, but some realize that it's bad, but don't want to be socially shunned by a group they belong to. Or maybe they do want to be socially shunned. Because after all, edginess is kinky. Or maybe their egos are at stake and they fear ridicule for their beliefs. So by defending the atrocity, they're morally defending themselves like a bunch of sissy liberals. Or maybe they don't give a frick. A lot of it also has to do significantly with dehumanization and smear campaigns against entire groups of people. Like, say, illegal aliens, which has a weird ET theme going for it. If you view them not as legitimate humans trying to protect themselves and families from oppressive forces in their own countries, and legal means fail to resolve this due to flaws in the legal system, but rather as bloodthirsty job stealers who pillage your country's woman and gather in gaggles of machete-wielding marijuana gangs to crusade your border, then it's easier for you to justify them being held in containment camps at the Mexican border, separating children from their parents, and letting the border patrol snoop the contents of their cell phones and, therefore, personal lives, as they did the former #1 Smash Bros. Champion Zero, ain't it? If you have, say, a prominent political leader who blames, say, a generalized demographic of people for ongoing problems in that stupid country, chances are the bandwagon effect will take place, and a significant batch of that leader's diehard supporters will go out of their way to defend this newfound worldview that makes so much sense now that a famous mofo has said it, even if it defies their own personal morals like Scooby-Dooby-Doo unto others said they'd Scooby unto yeah. And so goes the beauty of freedom, where anybody can say anything! And thankfully, if you can exploit your freedom of speech to tell me a bunch of Mexicans are flooding the job market and stealing all the jobs Americans so very want, like as major slaughterhouse workers, I can exploit my freedom of speech to tell you. Next time you point a finger, I'll point you to the mirror. But in order to defend an atrocity, there's gotta be a benefit out of you defending it. Unless there's somehow not, then you're weird. After all, your average Jose does care about their self-image, and defending OJ Simp or Don the Jontron ain't gonna help that. Perhaps it is to defend your place within a community as tightly knit as furry handcuffs, and you get that sense of community spirit by standing up for what you and your cronies vibe with. Perhaps there is a slightly, nay, remotely rational reason to defend it if the topic at issue is a point of contention where at least the binary choices can have detestable outcomes in some hemisphere of life and no reasonable alternatives have been presented. Like abortion, kinda not really, and a lot of dumb skaters like to do it for US presidential elections while ignoring the Green Party. Perhaps it is for the satisfaction of winning an argument, or the satisfaction of affirming your existing beliefs by pretending to win the argument by utilizing the same talking point over and over again. Perhaps it is to make the opposition look bad. After all, those pesky opposition are trying to destroy your way of life. Duh! And maybe it's even a material incentive, like money. This is why many lawyers exist. Frick. Or perhaps it is to defend the already existing way of life, and a gripping fear of any change to it that seems even slightly radical, overhauling the lifestyle you've worked so hard to build conjures images of bedlam and safe spaces destroying your society. Or who cares if your existing way of life has problems? It works for you. That's all you need to hear.
Capitalism is an extremely flawed and frankly weird economic system. A system that takes the human beings that, make it exist, and places them as secondary value to the almighty driver of progress, the economy. They could have at least made it Beyblade. Those slimy tapeworms. The economy is valued over a ton of freaking stuff, like equality, justice, freedom, healthcare, peace, education, environmental sanctity, morality, science, progress, truth, companionship, compassion, freaking creativity, safety, freedom, human rights, and even freaking love. All this stuff is great stuff that we should all be optimizing as driving goals to better ourselves and society and make life enjoyable for everyone. But the number one goal in life for in a capitalist society is to instead fill the linings of your leather teeth monster with paper that lets you get a bunch of stuff that has been assigned arbitrary value, of which you utilize your finite unit of measurement of your labor, or money, to pay for. Unfortunately, this also means that life and quality of life are dependent on the economy, which one that crashes like a Japanese warplane as it inevitably does, so does your overall quality of life and your ability to survive. Sorry about that small black dog. In case you're wondering who I am and why I am dressed like this monstrosity, well, I am currently utilizing a crazy video format with a cohesive argument to... Good question. In order to pursue an artistic talent to the fullest extent, or sleep in a comfortable bed, or live a happy lifestyle free of worrying how you'll survive the next week, you have to first surrender to the economy, aka the artificial realm of stock and grass where the phrase pull out can murder somebody, and then you have to make money. Because in capitalism you have to pay to win. What are you looking at? I don't even know anymore. How does the thing work? What the frick is this? But of course, the defunct problem is that not every person living under capitalism can afford to win. Many will never be able to win in their lives. And sure, for some of them it's because they're crap at the game, which I don't blame them. Reckless spending can be fun. But for others, it's because the game is intentionally rigged against them, so they lose most of the frickin' time. Do you like my game metaphor? Because I don't. Alright. So, yeah, you can push back to animated now, because, I'm gonna eat.
Okay, basically. In order to successfully suck victory into your outstanding vacuum in a capitalist society, you've got to yoink yourself up by whatever the actual frickin' chokey dokey, the bootstraps are. I think they're called overalls. And go on out there and generate income flow. But you can't just do that by making videos on the internet and hoping a bunch of people notice your existence and give you money. You must get a job. Unless that job is making videos for the internet, but otherwise you must get a job. I'm great! For shizzle, my nizzle, this does sound pretty riggedy radical. when you can afford it.
Prepare for trouble!
Make it double!
Hi, this time it's Bushino Shinro versus Tornado Wyvern. Yeah! So basically, life is freaking expensive, right? Everybody wants your income. Rent, insurance, electricity, gas, water, and even goddamn making it. The basic bare necessities cost your average schmuck almost $2,000 a month, let alone all the cool stuff you inevitably want to shell out your grease-laden, scribbled Illuminati artworks too. So you gotta find a way to keep up and make sure that you can, pay it off so that you can, survive. Unlike Bushino Shinro here, who just got wrecked by a tornado wyvern. But then there's a blunder. Oh, tornado wyvern goes. Specific entities fundamental to success in a capitalist society, such as a home or a college, will financially murder you.
Say you come from a poor family, right? Live on the other side of the tracks in a charter apartment barely big enough for your sizable family, and you only managed to scrape by because your mom's working 2 jobs at once. That managed to successfully pay off all the bills and have $2 left over. Sure, she has essentially no time to live her own life or raise her family, and 3 hours of sleep have essentially made her the first scientifically recognized specimen of the walking dead. But hey, you gotta do what you gotta do, right? Contrary to popular belief, you do not have to do what you have to do in this scenario. In this economic system, sure. If you barely have the ability to float your boat, especially if you're born into poverty like a lot, there ain't a brony's chance in prison you're gonna be able to afford $40,000 college fees, especially if you go to a low-income school where AP classes and scholarships and homework with pizzazz aren't readily available. The problem is that college degree is the key to getting a job that can pay for crap like college. So if you can't afford college, you're probably gonna get stuck in a low-wage job, sorta scraping by, maybe meagerly making a living, but definitely not living like Larry by any standards. There are exceptions, plenty of them. What I'm saying is that low-income comrades don't have nearly the same chances of success with the best, as opposed to those whom a crispy $100 bill is pocket change, and not a sign from Lord Oculon that the sky is raining miracles. And if you're thinking, the reason the working class brought out the bottom isn't because of some sort of systemic cycle of poverty continually pressing a gun to their temple to keep working for the owner class that divides them from the means of production, it's because they're lazy bums who use not smart finances to eat drugs. Don't worry, buddy. I'll get to you later. And there are always, of course, exceptions to make dreams out of. You can stick incredible adhesion to the idea of being an entertainer and promote yourself as best as humanly possible, and maybe do it. You could sacrifice all of your free time spent living your life to work multiple jobs, forever stuck toiling for jobs you are not compensated nearly as much as you should be since your boss company breaks laws as it sees fit. You could outsource your job to an Indian- Wait, what? Perhaps your best bet is moving up the job's hierarchical ladder through promotions and raises and begging your employer for promotions and raises. But that really depends on the job, its requirements, and how freaking good you are at it, and that takes loads of time as well that probably will accumulate more debt as a result. And I guess the street life is always a choice. It turns out a lot of people eat out perfectly dandy stuff, so word up of advice for my dumpster divity divas that college campuses and suburban neighborhoods are stacked with goodies. But you might also contact syphilis by ravaging through human waste, and lack of affordable healthcare for the impoverished makes this a frankly less viable option. But whoa the disparity, like I whoa when I nearly hit a tree on a bicycle once. I'm thankful to gain refuge in a buttload of AP classes, but many poorer schools don't offer advanced placement STEM or dual enrollment because they cost cash they don't have. Meaning if you go to a low income school you probably didn't have control over selecting, you're more disadvantaged in your chances of paying for college than higher income equivalents that offer stuff that'll help you. GASP! Is that classism? And this is where the racial wealth gap comes in. The problem is that many not white people are born into poverty, often because the incomes of many black, Hispanic, and indigenous families are tiny in comparison to white and sticky incomes, and can't afford schooling because it'll cost you 19,093 packs of Pokemon cards, so they end up dancing a little above poverty for at least a good chunk of their lives because they don't have a degree that lets them achieve work payments of a higher degree. If you're poor or homeless, you can't just find a job to buy a home, forehead. There's a reason why they were cast far away from their homes in the first place by the conniving bank wizards of Beverly Hills, Chihuahua too. And many jobs will judge you and call you sus at a lack of home address, lack of reliable transportation, bad hygiene, and even criminal records that hinder many poor people from even nailing a job. And this doesn't mean all poor people are dirty criminal scum. That would be rich people you're thinking of. And the poors are all just like you and me, but they often simply lack the resources to, live. And maybe a few got caught stealing once because they don't have the money to pay for food. Which is why poor people often are not suffering from an overt obsession with keto diets and Weight Watchers. Hey, Who would have thunk it? Hi, I'm Jerry. I've come to tell you about shaving cream. I have a beard. I don't like it. I tried plucking it out with my wife's nail clippers, but all it resulted in was a lawsuit. So now I'm here, stuck in a shaving cream commercial, waging a critique of commercialism, offering an imaginary product to a confused audience for no discernible reason. So I've just come to tell you. This is a joke. This is all a joke. Don't take any of this seriously. I don't mean any of the things I actually say. After all, what good possibly comes from asking questions? Just buy my shaving cream! And one of capitalism's most defective institutions is the accumulation of debt. Because if you're swimming in unpaid payments like how I swim in lava, which means drowning in unpaid payments, you ain't affording a place to live, buster! You're likely gonna spend anywhere from weeks to life sleeping on a park bench because you'll be paying off credit cards or college or unpaid taxes that keep growing farther out of reach as you're unable to pay them off, till it gets to the point your credit score is single digit and your only viable hope is selling yourself off to a rich noble / sugar daddy. Aha! I sense a rebuttal. Manage your money, they say. Take Econ 101 and learn how to save stonks. Despite the fact that we spent most of Econ 101 learning stupid supply and demand graphs and watching a normie think socialism is when the government does stuff is an accurate representation of leftist economics. Perhaps, if workers were to be properly compensated for the full value of their our work, and the surplus value was not stolen by the robber barons for profit, there would be more of an ability to even remotely meet people's basic needs. Perhaps, if the basic needs to life were not privatized and marketized, we would not have to deal with limits to our rights to survive in the first place. Perhaps, if the government would at least divert its pooled tax dollars to destroy and rebuild the crumbling infrastructure of its social services that at least help members of the public being screwed over by the private sector, maybe we wouldn't have to deal with all this crap we have to deal with. This, of course, is under the presumption that the government is acting in the best interests of the people. But hey, what would I know? I'm not the one paying the politicians hundreds of millions. And while there are tens of millions of Americans and billions of world people currently caged like an elephant with their backs against the wall, with poverty devouring them and the exploitation zebra just going to town on their face, there are a few thousand humans that can make these peeps' problems vanish like my need to pee after I see a unicorn. Say, speaking of unicorns.
Emergency alert! Hey there, Squirt. I don't know about you, but when it comes to performing activities that slightly mediate the soulless shuffle through the menial tasks of life, I like to ward off the inevitable demons by playing Who's That Pokemon? Do you know what Who's That Pokemon is? Well, now you can do that, but it's actually useful. Today on Who's That Endangered Species, we're here to highlight some keystone creatures not within the span of the mainstream eye. Who's the endangered species? Jeopardy music. Did you get it? Too bad. You stink. You stinky stunk. You're wrong. The regent honey eater. Aggressive platypus noises. Now, as you probably know, birds are important. They're indicator species. They do stuff like pollinize nectar, or in the case of the honey eater eats whatever eucalyptus is. This helps to keep the ecosystem vibing. It turns out birds also die a lot. The regent honey eater lives in the eucalyptus forest of Australia. Snazzy bird, no doubt. It can warble like larger birds and throw them aloof. It's Australian, so by default it has superpowers, obviously. And it's capable of flying hundreds of miles during the non-baby making season on nothing but plant nectar, its main diet source. That's also the reason why it's important. By eating nectar, the honey eater is primarily the reason for fertilization of the eucalyptus trees in the forests they reside, allowing for birds to continue living sustainably. The eucalyptus continue growing healthily and preserving the luscious biodiversity and the ecosystem services of the Australian eucalyptus forest. Gee, it's too bad that as of October 2020, they're critically endangered. As an estimation of about 350 to 400 birds remain in the wild, putting a lot of legwork on few nectar suckers. Why? Death! The number of the regent honey eater have plummeted frantically to the interspecific competition of larger, more aggressive Chad birds like noisy miners. The extreme wildfires that engulfed Australian eucalyptus forest in 2018 still sometimes do now. Habitat loss, engorgation, fragmentation, the eucalyptus forest by primarily human-derived activities. Donate to BirdLife Australia or IUCN. I concur, or another prominent organization dedicated to the protection of the endangered species. Do it now! Spread awareness as the state of this poor stinky bird. Alright, now we continue squattering. Existence complaining about how Mario Party is too expensive. Oh my god. What the hell did I just read?
I'm Italian.
Prepare for trouble. Make it double.
Perhaps the largest crime of capitalism is simple. You know them, you love them, you occasionally send motivational quotes on Facebook saying they said them. My white uncle, bourgeoisie. Yes, whether they own Taco Bell or own 2.2 millions of acres of land or have the pee of 1,000 workers on their hands.
Jeffrey Bezos.
The people that stand to benefit the most from transferring ownership of the factory from all hands to one hand is the one hand, the upper class, the rich.
Jeffrey Bezos.
Obviously, people cannot work together without material incentive or oversight from higher-ups, except for the thing with the bird you just saw, where two unpaid workers collaborated to produce what can only be described as bingus, with the only oversight being oversight my ass. The hand that feeds! For the masses to uncritically eat and be grateful that they can't eat, and aren't like Stacy out sleeping in the snow, at risk of freezing to death because she wasn't good at algebra. While they are mostly the product of capitalism, it is the rich's acceptance and exploitation of capitalism for personal gain that might be described as problematic by some and genocidal by others. The wealthy can best be summed up like this, in my objective, non-biased opinion. People who have more money than one would ever see, let alone need, in their entire goddamn lifespan, who have the potential to purchase and privatize parcels of the planet as huge as freaking Tokyo, and even construct lavish mansions that could adequately house 100 times the amount of families they actually house, who often have extremely high ecological footprints as a result of their waste-ridden lifestyles and harm the rest of us as a result, who garner extraordinary amounts of influence and power simply because they sold their souls to Apple, and who often do not get their money by legitimately working their way up to the top of the mountain, no cap. Because no singular human could fairly earn $100 billion by keeping at the hard work, without the help of a huge workforce doing the work for them, even as a brain surgeon or inventor of Burger Boy's newest sardine mustard parfait. Now, of course, not every rich mofo can order their whopping truck butts of dongs by putting stock in human trafficking. But I'm not saying that, says I, the Thayer. Just like the police system, or the educational system, or the YouTube algorithm, or Rebecca Black, it is not the bad apples that taint the bunch, but rather the act of it being a bunch that taints the apple. Wait, let me try again. It's not a few bad, evil people that cause the problems that come from being rich. Rather, it is the act of becoming rich that causes the problems of rich. Put another pen in there. In order to bathe yourself in greenbacks and the work of actual laborers, many a time the case is you need to invest in stocks, to purchase assets, by owning stock in companies, to make you the co-owner of some corporation somewhere and piggyback off the work of other people and profit from it. Which, is not really work. Also, I'd like to point out that the vocab buzzwords used by business people are the most disappointingly bland and stale dregs of vocabulary to ever be weakly thrust into the English language. If you described it as plasmifying your soul coins into the Leviathan Octopus Hub Center to ride majestically upon a warhorse into the hurricane of tidal wave economics, I'd be much more willing to bind my soul to a rigged system. There's a really simple illustration of how the rich get rich. Landlordism. You got, well, you, some yippee-ki-yay uncle-clucking knuckle-huck-up chucked from your parents' garage into the real world. Cause I guess everything before high school graduation was just a Kool-Aid-fueled marijuana trip. However, now you have no money and need a place to live. Look over there, however. It's landlord Lars. He's got money and a place to live. You go, "Oh, landlord Lars, you sweet-cheeked basketball player who was easily susceptible to flattery and also has the biggest brain in town. Won't you dig some compassion from your landlord heart and let me live at a place?" Now, landlord Lars owns like 10 houses, but being that he's 30 and doesn't have much of a life outside of real estate, so no life, he really only needs one house. Nevertheless, he thinks like a landlord. Not to the extent you need a house, but to the extent of profit he can make from the marketable exchange of goods and services transacted between the producer and the consumer, where the producer provides affordable housing for the tenant in exchange for a monthly rent payment provided by the consumer. Now, in a vacuum with nothing but supply and demand graphs, this would make sense. Paying rent for a house is simply one Chuck paying another Charlie for goods and services, so the Charlie getting paid through rent produces the service for the Chuck paying for it to consume it. It's just like a Netflix subscription. Here's the problem though, Doc. You don't need a Netflix subscription. I love Agretzko as much as the next raccoon dog, but if life or death meant ending my streaming subscription, the shadowy cloud looming over my heart would probably clear up after about a few months of forceful weeping in the closet. Now, if we're talking about rent, there'd be no closet to frickin' cry in, would there? If you're kicked out of your home, you give up your safety, your storage space, your Hatsune Miku body pillow, likely much of your other stuff, and if you have family or friends you live with, the safety and stuff and storage space and body pillows of others, all because you didn't give enough of your hard-earned money to satisfy the material wants of your landlord. And not only that, the consequences ain't equal. In event of an eviction, the tenant loses their safety, their power, and possibly most of their stuff essential for survival under this frickin' system. Meanwhile, all the landlord loses is one source of income from a job the tenant could no cap do themselves. At which point the landlubber goes fishing around for another unlucky college kid who hasn't been exposed to this kind of stuff to the point where they can know they're being exploited.
Another example. Provided you work for a company, asterisk, your job, especially if it's a minimum wage or a bit above that, you can work your hardest, and it won't matter. 1, 2, 3. My baby don't mess around because she loves me so much. And the company is incentivized to pay its workers as little as possible. And when it can do that, it will, in order to maximize profits for the owners. And while a worker's income might be their lifeline, the reason their babies can eat or their grandma's medical bills can be paid, the income the owning class gets is oftentimes far larger than that of the typical worker. While some of the income goes to cover the basic needs of the owners, no doubt, they are given so much more wiggle room and economic freedom purely for owning more stuff, simply because of the wealth generated from owning the workplace rather than compensation earned from doing a job. Like, think about this. Almost 40% of working Americans can't scrape together $400 in an emergency. Yet if Jeffrey Bezos, lost $400 billion, that'd pretty much be the equivalent of you losing a nickel, provided you are the average working person. Once again, unequal consequences.
To me, extreme wealth sounds like one of the worst and wackiest lifestyles one could possibly consider, let alone undergo, where your money comes from the labor of other people who may be barely scraping the bottom of the Donkey Kong banana barrel themselves, and your reward to them is to pocket half the proceeds to build another Wendy's in a vacant parking lot while your employees wiggle like blubber as many continue struggling to pay for housing, healthcare, education, electricity, entertainment, groceries, and drinking water. Well, the only way you retain the rights to the proceeds of your employees is through owning the places they work at, i.e. the means of production, retaining the capacity to accumulate so much money you could just casually help fund a government if you wanted to. Unless your first name is Jeffrey, wink. And where you have materialized power over another person, over other people, over the entire country! I read a curious book recently, I mean like half a year ago because I'm freaking slow at editing, called The Power Paradox by which explores the effects of power on the human psyche. It's a stunning read, which most teens don't get nowadays, am I right? But the basic principle is that, just as qualities like empathy, trustworthiness, and responsible handling of basic moral principles to advance the common good can raise people into powerful positions, whether it be supreme ruler of the planet or good sport in Mario Kart, so too can power corrupt if not handled responsibly. It can lead to greed for more power at the expense of the power-nots, usage of your influence to promote bad things, disregarding basic moral principles, and perhaps boarding a high horse and mooning the underlings below. We see it all the time. Think of how many times you've heard of a YouTuber whose platform lost lots of credible influence at attempts to attack or manipulate their audiences, like Jellopocalypse or or Shane Dawson? Did he ever even have credibility? Wait, why am I using YouTubers as example? A congressman gets a little big for his britches and actively promotes policies directly defiant of the interests of the common good, and the end result might be lead-laden drinking water or 1/4 of the country falling below the poverty line. A movie studio could be founded on animating mega-based movies for the masses to gawk at, but $500 billion later the imagination's leaked out and it's remaking its own films. Sad. The dog craves the title Queen of Milkbones, and when she gets it she has an array of choices. She uses the choices to pursue self-interest, and she's eating the lion's share of the milk bones and leaving the rest of the dogs with the scraps. I'm telling ya, eat the rich. Note that these individuals' behaviors are oftentimes simultaneously encouraged and incentivized by a wider system. Like, people are obviously in control of their own actions to some degree, since sadly my 3rd grade magic show ruined the illusion after I did not cluck like a chicken. But, to apply a delicious dose of coffee and Newton's 3rd law onto your creamy being, Just as we exert an influence onto our environment, like Kirby, likewise exerts a notable influence right back at us, creating a system of influencing not unequivocal to a gangbang betwixt two notable cultural influencers trying to maintain a self-sustaining ecosystem. Amazon can keep quaffing the raven and proclaim, "We compensate our workers, they get money," while pushing the bottle of worker urine underneath its luxurious rug made from the blood, sweat, and tears of an impoverished Chinese child. But if it exists inside a corporate community culture to pursue profit above all else, and it means more money for Amazon executives if they snuff the life from the first worker they see mention union, you might be able to get a whiff of this BS it considers workers' compensation. Take that in stride, however, since one's actions as an individual are not always representative of the larger community. I am legally obligated to further report that my radical fringe actions do not fully represent the goals and ideals of the My Little Pony community, and that no members of said community advocate setting fire to an orphanage in the names of Princess Celestia and equestrian imperialism. Now, such sweeping generalizations are evidently not applicable to all forms of power. One can also gain power from manipulating the unempowered's emotions or interests, pretending to have power-giving traits while being full of crap, convincing people that the bad thing is the good thing, or vice versa. Frick, sometimes people buy it. Oh wait, that's right! Money buys power. However, a key point I'd like to emphasize is that I don't oppose power. To do so would be a fundamental misunderstanding of the term power, since it is not just the institution of bumbleheads we call the bosses, the government, and the police. Power is present in essentially every interaction we have with other mofos. Whether you're asking your GF for the fleet flew, or texting your bud Ron a weird monkey gif, or lobbying the government to let you collapse the entire atmospheric system, or shouting out your feedback in a conversation your two friends are excluding you from. You could be working for any number of goals, but the inevitable result is you attempting to exercise any degree of influence over others. That's the definition of power. To influence others or a course of events. Even the selfless who value others' fates above their own and would jump in front of a train to stop it from running over a cat or something are still acting in ways to influence a course of events.
Dear liberals, rather system that we created is composed. Round 2. Strongly opposed systems with regard to power, evil capitalism, and good democracy. I'm Dennis Prager.
Democracy encourages acting in the best interests of the greater good to maximize the quality of life for the most people possible. It vests power among the inhabitants of the society to decide on the policies that will best enhance the common good. Okay, flawed, but we can work on it. Capitalism encourages acting in the best interests of self-interest to maximize the amount of profit made for, well, no specific number of people, just whoever is best at the game, and also the cheaters, and also less than 1% of the population, and also over half of all money belongs to 8 people. It vests power among those with the most money to decide on the policies that will best pursue the interests of those with the most money, and as the world's first $200 billion heir comes in his stock, the interests appear to be to make more money, no matter the cost, ironically. Okay. Flawed. This mishmash of ideologically opposed ideals has led to a very weird system where the government staff is selected for the most part by the people, so long as you don't count large portions of the legislative, executive, and judicial branches, and also not all people, prisoners can't vote, and influenced by the rich. Popular interest is definitely a factor in weighing opinions, unless you're in prison. The political candidate's entire job is waged on whether or not the majority of the voting public can support them, after all. Unless you're appointed. It is the rich, however, who can use their massively concentrated stacks of cash to endorse political candidates, to pay for millions of dollars of lobbyists to back oil subsidies, to install corporate-sponsored education programs, to do a feudalism and unfairly spike the probabilities of the next generation working for their business, to embark on massive misinformation campaigns in the efforts to keep the public in conflict so their industry can profit off the impending apocalypse, to set up political action committees to influence which leader the people will most likely choose, who also happens to really like money, to pay huge amounts of cash to charity and then exploit that huge donation by having almost total say as to how the charity uses said money, to make live-action reboots of Woody Woodpecker, to fill every ounce of free space with advertising that sponsors the biggest businesses to keep the cogs in the proto-industrial machine rolling, and to advocate for rollbacks of labor protections, consumer protections, and environmental protections because those that protect the greater good violate their core interests. Profit. So pee in a bottle! It is, therefore, in the state's best interest to preserve the interest of the upper class, whose goals in terms of power are to preserve their own power by maximizing profits. And perhaps the biggest sin of all is to exploit power like this.
Hey, did I hear sin? Heyo! If you haven't studied history, the Christian Bible itself shuns the accumulation of money as a sin. And so does the Quran, and the Torah, and my personal Bible, The Grumpy Guide to Life, Observations by Grumpy Cat. Long ago back in medieval Europe, if you accumulated your milk money and did not distribute it to, other people, the Bible says you're gonna burn like cedar. Because after all, greed is one of the deadly seven deadly sins, either, or you get the frickin' greed is one of the 7 deadly sins after all. Although, fun fact, the 7 deadly sins were not mentioned in the original Bible. They were... When capitalism started existing around the 17th century after Adam Smith purged the landscape with demonic fire, this biblical view of legit kindness counteracted the goals of capitalism to make a tiny amount of people rich and powerful, and the rest not. And the wealthy frickin' redefine the Bible to fit their needs. You may have heard of the Gospel of Wealth, where robber barons in the Gilded Age applied survival of the fittest to God to try and justify making people work long hours in dangerous conditions for little pay, 6 days a week with little rights to the worker, and all the workers' work going to fuel the profits of a tiny, tiny minority that owns the means of production, who also absorbs or forces any competition into inevitable death, making way for an economy with only 1 or 2 versions of the same project, which takes the notion of competition in capitalism and blows it to smithereens. Crumbs of competition seeping down the drain pipe.
Danger can lie in using an unchanging, unprovable
"It's just the way it is"
mindset as your fundamental politica to life. Like, why do you think slavery's disappeared? The divine worldview certainly wasn't explained thoroughly enough to prevent hundreds of millions of human peoples from being caught and killed in global involuntary human trafficking campaigns, and clearly our interpretation of slavery differs from 3 centuries earlier, where some people of the same religions, economic systems, political systems, and thick jiggle booties thought it morally acceptable to call people not people and exploit their entire lives for profit. Liberals, explain!
It must have been America!
It's called change. Things change, people change, ideas change, and societies change, and so the ethics of a society are inevitably different from one 2,000 years before it. Only when people questioned, disavowed, and began combating the set-in-stone shenanigans of their economic and political and yada-yada systems did properdizing people to both profiteer and prejudice become taboo. So classical liberals, you can eat my gelatinous belly button. And back to authority, the people in charge of this country, speaking from the US, this so-called democracy, are not the people like me or you or your friend Jose with the googly eye and the otherworldly obsession with Warhammer. The authority is the bourgeoisie, the pigwigs, the capitalists who own Walmart rather than work there, a class of their own who have an ideal incentive to keep their money and make more money, even if at the expense of their workers making less money. We may have certain political rights, like voting for an official you think might do a few things you kinda like, or lobbying your Congress official to do a thing maybe, but probably not, even if you forge enough people's signatures, or thinking you have the right to vote for the president when the Electoral College says absolute freak all to do with the popular vote, and instead chooses party officials to vote for rando electors to elect a president instead, which just kinda complicates things, but admittedly we're used to that. Or me having the freedom to make this video criticizing the economic system under which we live in under the pretense that this is all satire, and definitely, not at all, a loophole. That's a nice one, I guess, except when it isn't. But most of those political rights tend to have an overtly pro-cap agenda. The US has been known to install military coups to hijack free elections in developing countries, where the people would have chosen maybe a socialist or a slightly left-leaning leader, but instead election rigging and the CIA just plain assassinated those leaders to help contain communism and
spread the poop butterfly of capitalism.
In the US itself, anytime it smells something even remotely to the left of liberal, like the Black Lives Matter protest or universal healthcare, begins bouncing around like a gorilla, screams, "Commie!" and sends a battalion of SWAT team members and dusty wife beaters to end the spread of the virtue signaling, Boy Scout destroying, Lola Bunny desexualizing, gay, atheistic, hippy-dippy, communalist, Stalinist, SJW, Antifa, feminazi, gender fluid, millennial, secular, radical, leftist, cuck, cultural, Marxist, snowflake, Pizzagate, libtard agenda, simply trying to demand rights promised to them by the freedom government. TLDR for those whose attention span fizzled out after the first 30 seconds thanks to YouTube's newest feature. Money buys power, and with all that money spraying from every orifice of a bourgeois body, when the capitalist gains power, you can bet their end goal is, as my economics teacher, whose monotony made me want to stick kitchen utensils up my nose, claims the #1 goal of every business is to make a profit. And now, I'd like to present a quick list of the crimes of capitalism. By no means is it a cumulative master list you can refer to anytime you feel the urge to cry in the shower, but it helps sum up things. In the pursuit of profit...
Hello. I just had a quick question for you real quick. What do the video making process and rolling a 6-sided die have in common? Simple. The outcomes are random. Alright. No, okay. So my lucky numbers were a 6 and a 9, right? And these two numbers, right, if I write them down on 2 strips of paper, travel to a maid cafe in a Japanese province, insert them into a candy machine, twist the lever upon the candy machine to produce a candy, consume the candy, like nom nom nom, and keep the candy wrapper, then hold the candy wrapper up to the sunlight for approximately 24 hours after consuming the candy, and if the candy wrapper turns dark after 5 minutes, those two numbers will be the first 2 digits of my future mate's phone number. Oh man, I got a guru screen touching a few. But before I leave you here, isolated in the thought pod, twiddling your fingers to 21 pilots, as you ponder the vast philosophical questions of life, I wanted to give you a few suggestions to approaching stuff life, IDK. Don't worry, it's not me blasting my nefarious communist agenda to transform the world into gay anime soldiers to kill all gamers. That comes later. Rather, imagine this as BookTube, and I am categorizing tips and tricks into a numerical list to make you feel like a mom. Okay, first off, neither would I, nor would anybody says is a gospel. The only way to learn things is by asking questions, or apparently by filling in the blanks of 10-page interactive WebQuest adventure worksheets according to my bio class. And when I say question, I mean go to town in pursuit of answers. Use such strategies like critical thinking and logical analysis to get to the bottom of any unsolved mysteries. But don't just question me. Committing yourself to a thought, idea, ideology, worldview, whatever, wholeheartedly is fallacious and dangerous AF, right? New ideas should not be viewed as threats, but rather tools you can use to analyze yourself to see if you are mistaken in some aspect, form, or field of life, for it is human to err. But the good thing about being human is your capacity to do good, or change your capacity to do good through simply having an open mind. No, I don't mean purposefully befriending every arbitrary subdivision of human being as representatives of their entire culture, although if you refuse to befriend somebody based on a trait out of their control, you literally play Fortnite, scum. But in statistics, increasing N, your sample size, allows you to gain more confidence in your levels to generalize results. So converse to, or watch, or read, or mate with a large and diverse amount of people with different opinions, traits, skills, facts and logic, and body pillows to grow your experience with the world. If you only read Karl Marx to learn about the evils of capitalism, or make opinions on gay people while never having interacted with a gay people, or only having one Japanese teacher in your life, you risk being subject to bias that may distract from your complete understanding as a result. If there is anybody that nobody likes to deal with, it's jerks. Don't be a jerk. Basic empathy for the feelings and borders of others help you deal with this. But if you catch a hardcore meatloaf jangling someone's bills, stop bullying and speak up. And I mean call it out or boot it from your Discord server. You don't have to fill out a form on the Cartoon Network website. So don't be rude, or I'll cuss you out, slur your existence, and show up at your house in this mask with a spiked wiffle ball bat.
Alright, here's a blooper reel. Yes, that's right, folks. I am pushing an agenda. Definitely not a liberal agenda, because all that does is swap the skin color of the mofo bombing innocent civilians in hospitals. And definitely not a conservative agenda, because I want to be in a functioning relationship someday. Ha! Roasted! Politics potshots! Be prepared to defecate in your ideological trousers, because you just got triggered! But why should you care? Everybody pushes an agenda every time someone does a thing to someone else. Like when your mom tells you to go clean your room, she's shoving her parental agenda down my freaking throat! I don't want to clean it! Of course, easy answer, and yes, ask the question. We want to know the purposes for who does a thing. Why? Why does Michael Jordan want you to stop it? Shouldn't he stop it? Shouldn't he perform a little introspection and stop it before he goes telling you to get some help, kid? How about you practice what you preach, basketball man? Well, I'm gonna be as honest as an emo when after opinion on the finger of MCR. I'm gonna tell you my agenda, but in the form of a story.
Stop it.
POV. You are sitting at a table in the middle of a summoning circle playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Against your good buddy Rowley. You activate your spell card that summons the Hungry Man. The Hungry Man is a 1200 defense power, 1200 attack power spellcaster type. A unique golem whose potential may seem relatively limited by his abysmal statistics, but whose ability makes him extremely intriguing. Vor. You see, when the Hungry Man is reverted into attack mode, his ability will immediately activate, and all cards in the arena will begin to gradually gravitate from their zones towards the Hungry Man. Likely your opponent will be shocked, stunned, bamboozled even! But they will not have time to say anything, as they too have begun to gravitate towards the Hungry Man. And by the time they realize, they are consumed, as the Hungry Man swiftly, stickily devours each entity in the field before they lay to rest in his basketball-shaped Garfield-esque chest cavity. By consuming all the field, the Hungry Man then reactivates to defense mode. And here it presents its collection of information it has just eaten to you, the player. A muffin-sized internet of information is laid before you, a gallery of ideas and ideologies to interpret in your own words, before you scroll a 15,000-word essay on how an author wrote a thesis in their article about teenage lingo in the post-Cold War era. But the problem is, there's so much garbage! There lies an entire planet's ecosystem of jank in the single Hungry Man, and time itself will unravel before all of this junk and non-junk can be seen and read and interpreted and sifted into junk and not junk piles. You can't possibly interpret all this. No. Suddenly, a masked top hat jumps on the card game table, knocking Rowley to the ground and pointing at you. Yes, you! Shouting, "You there, puny weakling!" At which you wet your trousers in shock. He continues, "You shan't, can't, and won't see all of that. Those are my orders!" At this, you go, "Why?" He then says, "Because if you were to see it, you know the true reason why I keep you down." You say, "What? What do you mean, keep me down? I don't even know who you are. All I know is you just ruined my card game, you frickin' jackass." "Silent fool!" he booms, like a guest speaker who can't operate the voice amplifier thingy correctly. "I am the system, and this is my stash of secrets hidden inside of a Yu-Gi-Oh card." "Not so fast, system," booms the third voice. You turn around, and your pants immediately spring upwards as a unique sensation overcomes you. It's George of the Jungle. "George!" System cries. "I thought I roast you in that pit of quicksand!" "Frick that!" George screams, transforming into a snake and biting System's hat. "No!" Then System evaporates, you save the day, you're no longer oppressed by a system you didn't even know was oppressing you. Hallelujah, it's raining tacos, happy ending, you get the desired partner of romantic interest, yay, story resolved, fade to black while eating Oreos and honey with your new friends Miss Piggy and Brock, subscribe for more content and click that notification bell, fam. So what's my agenda? Well, I don't like red pandas dying needlessly, and the status quo has done little to nothing to prevent the privately owned ghouls and goblins from destroying the planet's ecosystems with their harpoon guns, because the government is primarily bought out by the rich. Most of whom become rich by not paying workers the full value of their work because there is more incentive to get that booty rather than be nice to people. It is this ketamine overdosing Mr. Krabs attitude that means the rich are the primary reasons we have more than 0 live action now and in the Chipmunks movies. Society is driven by the economy is driven by profit, and therefore those without money must pay the price by living in a car. In recent history, we have had thousands of absolute monsters flock to the internet to complain about women being Ghostbusters. Which is very weird, because girls are literally the gnarliest people. I don't know what these numpties were and still are whining about. And in further news, Ben Chabino still has a viewer base. Finally, little to no action is being taken under a capitalist system to prevent a plethora of problems because no action is being taken against the core heart of the problem, the status quo. So I want to help and prevent many of the foreseen problems in the future that could make 2020 look like Squidward's Gangsta Paradise. And haha, that line was so quirky and relevant, so I guess I didn't need Yu-Gi-Oh to tell you all that, but we'll get to all of this bunk in more detail later in the vid, I promise. Just remember, transphobes are poopy heads, and this was all segue!
If the company loses a worker, it might lose a few bucks, sure, but it can just slap a now hiring ad on the window and recruit a new worker in quick time, asterisk. At times, companies even frickin' benefit from firing their employees because they don't have to spend money paying people like you, Slimeball. But however, if you lose your job, well, making it more likely for you to meet the poverty gargoyle, we'll stick his heads inside your lips, slowly steal your life force. Know that losing a job can be no fault of your own. Let's say, hypothetically, maybe you were 5 minutes late because your car broke down, so you had to take the bus. But since you were, well, late, you violated company policy and therefore cannot be trusted. See ya, wouldn't want to be ya. Excuse me. You like how I said, let's say hypothetically, like Ben Shapiro did? It's funny, because Ben Shapiro is a freaking idiot. I will admit that personal experience kinda eludes me on this one. Like, I love my job for its chill community and tasty taste ice cream. Here's the flip. But, like, I got lucky, right? You can just take a look at the typical office worker to see how their life force can be slowly drained from their bodies.
Oh, hey guys, it's me, the editor, just pausing real quick, and before we continue brainwashing you with my laser vision, right here, right next to me, is a real live-action office worker that I have asked to come in, that I have scheduled for an interview. So, what is your name, office worker? Don. Oh, hi, nice to meet you, Don. So what's it like being an office worker? Among Us. What? Ah!
You like my Hatsune Miku poster? It's kinda hot. Ever been given an extra task to do on your downtime on the expectation that you, yes you, are supposed to be working the entire time? Even if there's, like, really no need. Ever been drilled into by your boss or even threatened with job termination for doing what you're supposed to be doing? Ever been fired for an excuse like, you're not doing your tasks, or you're not following company policy? Around a time where it seems like a company may be losing profits, such as you're on paid medical leave or the economy's in a rut. Ever been in love with a poster? No matter your outlook on the situation, just remember this. The number one goal of a company is not to provide a quality good or service or to properly compensate its workers and make them able to live happily or even to follow company policy. All these, of course, are byproducts, but they're by no means obligatory, especially if they interfere with the pursuit of the number one goal. To make a profit for the owners of the business, no matter the cost to the consumer, the worker, or the surrounding landscape. Bye.
Hi, I'd like to apply for a job. Great, do you have a reliable source of transportation? PFFF. You kidding? Cars are thousands of dollars up front alone, let alone the endless amounts of cash they hungrily consume in gasoline and oil repair. And anytime a car thing says, oh yeah, I forgot to stop working today, and decides to break, I can't afford that. Well, guess we can't afford to hire you either. What? You're a McDonald's. Good day. Ah yes, what a beautiful day to be out doing this. It sure couldn't get any more beautiful. Oh.
I am as much an advocate of rape as I am of anti-Semitism.
Everywhere I'm looking now, I'm surrounded by your embrace. Baby, I can feel your halo. Play it won't fade away. You're everything I need and more. I'm surrounded by your embrace. Baby, I can feel your halo. Pray it won't fade. See your halo